have a headset, Dave?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, Gene is on, and we're so grateful to our musicians who have provided inspirational music. Oh. We're grateful to all of you who down there at Lighthouse for providing our inspirational music while we waited for Gene. Now, Gene, we're glad that you're here, and our recorder is connected. So I want to say good evening to everyone. We are starting a new course tonight on advancing the church, and Gene Pickard is going to be presenting on Friends Global Ministries. I know you share my enthusiasm about this. Gene, we have already had a prayer and an intercessory prayer and a prayer of thanksgiving. But let me say a word to you about Gene. Gene grew up in Salem, Iowa, which is the home of the oldest Friends Church west of the Mississippi. And I'm not sure quite how this works, but it was the first Whittier College. I'll have to get educated on that one. And it was the westernmost station of the Underground Railroad. There he attended the Salem Friends Church, where he committed his life to Christ, and he received his call to ministry and missions. So he is a graduate of Mount Pleasant High School in Iowa, Berkeley College, Asbury Theological Seminary. Now I'm hoping that you will correct any Spanish that I don't have correct, Gene. Instituto de Lengua Española, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, and he holds a Doctor of Missiology degree. He is only one of two Quakers who have a Doctor of Missiology. Gene is married for 46 years to Myra, native of South Dakota. They have two married children, Heather Hayes, who is our neighbor right here at Berkeley College, and Jason Pickard, and they have 4 grandchildren. He has ministered in teaching at San Antonio Friends Church, Asbury Theological Seminary, Berea Bible Institute in Guatemala, and Berkeley College. He is currently teaching in the Master of Arts in Quaker Studies at Berkeley College. He's director and one of the teachers at our Bible Institute for Hispanic Leadership Development in a ministry of Evangelical Friends Church Southwest. And I will say, most important of all, he is a true friend who embodies the Friends' values, who has Christ at the center of his life. Gene, we're grateful to you for sharing with us this evening and look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you, friend.
Okay. First of all, my deepest apologies for holding you up, keeping you waiting. I thought I could get on the computer in my office. Turns out that I needed to download the program. I haven't done that yet, so I made a quick trip home.
All students that I know, Gene, would be so happy that you were late getting here. Thank you for all that you've done to get on after about half a dozen attempts. And I'm going to mute my mic now and be quiet.
Okay. Of course, I hit every red light coming home, so that's the way it goes. And I want to congratulate you, Mid-America, for your Leadership Institute for Ministry. From what little bit I've seen of it, it's an excellent program. And Dave, I congratulate you for your leadership in it. So let's get right into the presentation for tonight. I'm going to start back at the beginning with George Fox. Some of this is going to be repetition to you because you've studied Friends history probably, most of you have. And so I just want to go over that a little bit, but I'm going to emphasize, of course, Friends and global mission and not just history in general as we go through this tonight. George Fox was born in 1624, so if you do the math, you realize that we're coming up pretty close to 400 years since George Fox was born. And at the age of 19, even though he grew up in a religious family, his father was a very pious man, he found that his Christian life was not very satisfying to him. And he began a spiritual journey that lasted some 4 years as he wandered around trying to get advice from different spiritual leaders. Some of those elements of advice, if you remember, were pretty strange, like take up smoking tobacco, join the army, get married, and so on. But all the time he was searching, he was also reading the scripture. And William Penn said that George Fox probably could have rewritten the Bible from memory if that had been in need to happen. So after 4 years of searching and meditation and Bible study, the 23-year-old Fox had a personal encounter with the living Jesus, with living Christ. And this is the way he describes it in his journal. When all my hopes in them, that is, the priests and separatist preachers, and in all men were gone, so that I had nothing outwardly to help me, nor could I tell what to do, then, oh then, I heard a voice which said, there is one, even Christ Jesus, that can speak to thy condition. And when I heard it, my heart did leap for joy. So whether that's his conversion experience, whether that's a deeper experience, I'm not probably qualified to say, but it was the experience that put him on the road to a great movement, what we know of as the Friends or Quaker movement in that day. So from that day in 1647, George Fox became a tireless itinerant preacher, preaching first of all in the central part of England in Leicestershire in his home county, and then he began to travel farther abroad. He traveled in different parts of England. In 1652, Fox was moving to the north part of England. He came to a hill called Pendle Hill, and he felt like God was telling him to climb that hill. So he did. At the top of that hill, George Fox had a vision, and he describes the vision in this way. When I came to the top, I saw the sea bordering upon Lancashire. From the top of this hill, the Lord let me see in what places he had a great people to be gathered. Wow, he had a great people to be gathered, and Fox began to do his best to gather that great crowd to the Lord. He preached to great crowds. He preached to hundreds, sometimes at a time. And many people were converted through his preaching. There were some 66 people that joined him in that ministry, which we often call the Valiant 60. Valiant because they were willing to risk abuse and imprisonment, the loss of their property, even death, to follow their understanding of what the gospel of Jesus Christ was. George Fox himself was imprisoned at least 8 times during his adult life. During the Commonwealth era alone, from 1649 to 1660, a total of 3,173 Quakers were imprisoned. 32 of those died in prison in England. When the monarchy was restored, there were even more. So these Quakers really put their life on the line. They had a vision. They had a vision for the whole world, not just England. A vision that flowed out probably out of that Pendle Hill experience that George Fox had. So in spite of serious persecution they faced, they just couldn't be stopped. They continued to travel, to preach. They believed God had commanded them to preach the Word of God, the gospel, to the whole world. And so about 75 years before the Great Moravian missionary movement began, George Fox penned these words from his prison cell to his fellow Quakers. He said, "Let all nations hear the word by sound or writing. Spare no place, spare not tongue or pen, but be obedient to the Lord God and go through the world and be valiant for the truth upon earth. Be patterns, be examples in all countries, places, islands, nations, wherever you come, that your tongue and life may preach among all sorts of people and to them." And so, as the Friends movement began to advance even into the American colonies, Fox became concerned about the souls of the native people in the American colonies. To friends in West Jersey and Pennsylvania, he wrote that they should preach the gospel of Christ to Indian kings and to their councils. He visited the Americas between 1671 and 1673, and during his journeys in the Americas, he took every opportunity to preach the gospel to the Indians as he came upon them and as he had the opportunity. So Fox believed that the gospel was not just for English-speaking world, but it was for all the world. In 1657, a letter was sponsored by Francis Howgill, Margaret Bell, and Edward Burrow, and was sent to all the counties of England. And the purpose was to bring in funds to help traveling missionaries who would be going to different parts of the world. This was to help them with their expenses and the service abroad to different nations. And so, from this letter, we see that at least two things are clear. First of all, the first generation of Quakers expected all of their members to become involved in some sort of missionary activity, either going or giving. And secondly, that first generation had a vision for outreach to the whole world. The gospel must be taken to all the nations. And they began to do that. Some of the stories that are fascinating to me are stories of some of the women that traveled. For instance, Mary Fisher and Ann Austin set out for Barbados in 1655, preached the gospel there, and then in 1656, they made the voyage on to Boston. When they arrived in Boston, they were immediately arrested, and they were accused of being blasphemers, heretics, lawbreakers. They were put in prison. Their books were burned in the marketplace. The authorities accused them of being witches and practicing witchcraft, so they were shamefully treated, stripped, subjected to outrageous examination for marks of witchcraft. They were placed in solitary confinement for 5 weeks. If it hadn't been for a Puritan by the name of Nicholas Upshaw, a member of the Church of Boston, who bribed the jailer to let him take them food, they probably would have died in jail. After that, they were released, and they were forbidden from ever returning to Boston again. But that little event didn't discourage Mary Fisher. In fact, one of her most famous journeys took place after that, in 1657 and 1658, when she was only about 24 years of age. She believed that God had called her to carry the gospel message to the Sultan of Turkey. And so she set out on a voyage to go there. When the British government officials at Smyrna found out what she was up to, they started to take her back on the ship, headed back to England. But when the ship got to Zante, Miss Fisher disembarked from the ship and started off walking by herself. 600 miles, no escort, no understanding the language. She walked 600 miles and somehow found her way to where the Sultan was, a young man of 17 at that time, in a city called Adrianople. And when she arrived there, the Sultan received her with joy and gladness. Very different from the treatment that she had received in Boston and from the treatment that she had received in her own country in England, where she had been beaten at one time for being a Quaker. So she spoke through an interpreter the things that God had placed on her heart, and the Sultan listened carefully and said that he had understood every word. And then after she had preached to him, he actually invited her to stay with his people and to continue to talk to them about the Word of God. She declined the offer. She felt like she had fulfilled her mission, and she walked back another 600 miles to get on the ship to go back to England. So by 1657, Quakers had gone to Holland, and soon they had visited every Catholic country in Europe to preach their understanding of the gospel. During the years 1657 and 1658, a man by the name of John Boran visited the Orkneys in the West Indies. Later he traveled to Suriname and then to an English plantation under Lord Willoughby. By the time of the Skipton General Meeting, which some consider the first year meeting, in 1660, a tremendous amount of territory had been covered. There's a minute that was written during that meeting that's especially interesting to me. I'm going to read this. It's a little bit lengthy, but it tells you the areas that the Friends had covered at that time. We received a certain information from some friends in London of the great work and service of the Lord beyond the seas. In several parts and regions as Germany, America, many islands and places, Florence, Mantua, Palatine, Tuscany, Italy, Rome, Turkey, Jerusalem, France, Geneva, Norway, Barbados, Antique, Jamaica, Suriname, Newfoundland, through all of which friends have passed in the service of the Lord, and divers other places, countries, islands, and nations, and over and among many nations of the Indians, in which they have had service for the Lord and have published his name and declared the everlasting gospel of peace unto them that have been afar off, that they might be brought nigh unto God. 1660, that's only 13 years after George Fox began his itinerant ministry. The Friends had had visits at least to every one of those places mentioned in that minute. In the spring of 1661, a second mission to the Far East, to the east was dispatched, English Friends, consisting of John Stubbs, Henry Fell, Richard Scotthrop, Daniel Baker. Fox tells us that the first three of these friends were moved to go to China and then to Prester John's country. We think that probably was Ethiopia. So they had designs to go to China and Ethiopia. They probably didn't make it there. No masters or ships wanted to take them, and they finally had to appeal to the king for a warrant for them to go, but the East India Company refused passage anyway, despite the king's orders. So they decided to go by caravan to Alexandria. Whether they arrived or not, I don't have that detail. The best-known Quaker enterprise probably is William Penn's settling of Pennsylvania and forming the colony Pennsylvania. Part of his purpose was missionary outreach to the other peoples. When he set out to found the colony, he said that he wanted it to be for the glory of God and in the civilization of the poor Indians and their conversions by just and lenient measures for Christ's kingdom. So Penn's desire was not only to found a colony for religious freedom, it was also a chance to evangelize the Indians that lived in that colony. By the way, I think you might be aware of this. The Quakers were the only group of people that ever made a treaty with the Indians in what's now the United States that was never broken. So these intrepid publishers of truth, they went all kinds of places. They probably had more zeal than they had wisdom. They charged in where angels feared to tread sometimes, and they often suffered much for the witness. Some, like John Perot and a companion, were imprisoned as a result of a bold attempt to go and convert the Pope. Perot's companion was later hung by the Inquisition. He himself was condemned to an insane asylum for 3 years. A couple of ladies, Catherine Evans and Sarah Shevers, fell into the hands of the Inquisition while they were traveling on a preaching trip to Europe. They were in prison for 3.5 years. Others were whipped and shipped back home to England. Anti-Quaker laws and persecution was especially severe in the American colonies, particularly in the colony of Massachusetts. There was a law passed there to the effect that Quakers who were banished and who returned would be put to death. And they did that. 4 Quakers were hung in Boston. Why? Because they were Quakers. And that's the only reason. 3 men and 1 woman. One of those, the woman that was hung was a woman by the name of Mary Dyer, who had been a Puritan and came to Quaker faith. She was sentenced to die along with 2 other men. She was on the scaffold and she was given a reprieve. And they gave her a reprieve and they told her to leave the colony and never come back. If she ever came back, she would be hung. But she did go back. She went back to challenge the unjust laws of Boston, and she was hung. Fortunately, the Quakers were able to get then an order from the King of England that stopped the hangings and the persecution in Boston. So, in spite of the great outreach of the 17th century Quakers, and it is quite amazing, isn't it, when you read of all the places that they went, there were probably, in my way of thinking, 2 very serious flaws in the movement. And these really wouldn't be remedied until the latter part of the 19th century. when the movement began again in all seriousness. I think, first of all, they lacked a real good mission strategy. They enjoyed phenomenal success among English-speaking people, but they left little fruit from their cross-cultural endeavors. In their haste to evangelize the whole world, they emphasized breadth more than they did depth. And so, generally, they didn't stay in any one place long enough to really learn the language or learn the culture of the people, and then, therefore, to make an impact. Mary Fisher is a great example of that. She went, spent a few days, preached the gospel there, and left. And so there was no lasting impact to her ministry to the Sultan of Turkey. They apparently failed to understand that God is the one who causes the growth, but He wants His people to stay in water, the plants that have been planted. I think part of the misunderstanding was a weakness in their biblical theology. It logically followed from the Quaker view of immediate guidance of the Holy Spirit, and by an emphasis on the inward and saving spiritual light. On the one hand, the Quakers had a high regard for the written word, but on the other hand, they considered the immediate guidance of the Holy Spirit to take precedence over the written word. And so naturally, they saw little need to remain and teach the word, because the Spirit Himself, as they understood it, would teach the word and would cause the growth, even though they didn't stay around to do it. He didn't need an intermediary to teach them and to bring about growth. And these early Quaker missionaries obviously understood the value of verbal and human witness about the historical Christ, but at the same time, they didn't believe that people had to hear about the historical Christ in order to come to saving faith. Even Socrates, Robert Barclay believed, had come to saving faith through his natural revelation that he had. So Barclay believed that all people everywhere have been enlightened by Christ. The Quaker scripture that they often emphasize was John 1:9, that Christ has enlightened every person that comes in the world. And so they believed that by that light, people could come to a saving knowledge of Jesus without ever having heard of the historical Christ. Now, in view of this understanding of Scriptures, it's a little bit surprising that they felt called to go at all and preach the gospel. But in their defense, Robert Barclay and Fox and others only were talking about the possibility of people coming to a saving knowledge of Jesus or faith in God, not to the probability of it. And so they did believe that in order for people to be awakened to that light, they probably need to hear the gospel preached to them. I think the second great flaw in the movement was the opposite of the first one. In the English-speaking areas, they began to give more and more attention to watering and almost no attention to planting. And so, after the death of George Fox, Quakers entered into what's often called the Age of Quietism. After the Act of Toleration in 1869, persecution stopped in England, and they began to become more ingrown. They began to be more navel-gazers, I suppose you could say, looking to see within whether they were right with God, whether they really should talk. They eventually lost their zeal and became ingrown, more concerned about inward purity of existing churches than with reaching others the gospel of Christ. Formerly world-transforming body became content to maintain its own isolation. There were legalisms that filled the Quaker experience, the kind of clothes that you wore, speaking the right way, your ethics, and so on. And people were often eldered if they didn't follow those rules. Young men were read out of meeting if they married a non-Quaker girl, and vice versa. And so this is the kind of thing we face in the age of quietism. The eldership became overly critical, and missionary zeal and evangelism was lost during that period of time. Henry Hodgkin, in his book Friends Beyond Seas, suggested that though it's difficult to assess cause and effect in a spiritual movement, the falling off of missionary zeal may have been part of the reason for a general decline in spiritual vigor. So the question is, did they lose their spiritual vigor and thus lose their missionary zeal, or did they lose their spiritual vigor because they lost their missionary zeal? I'll leave that for you guys to decide. During the age of quietism, he goes on to say, the family of prophets, which must spread over all nations, had become a self-contained, self-centered, and somewhat self-satisfied group of respectable, consistent, and philanthropic persons. Fortunately, there were itinerant preachers that kept the faith alive among Quakerism. We see those especially in the Americas after the Revolution. One that's especially interesting to me was a Frenchman by the name of Stephen Grier. Stephen Grier was a French nobleman. His family was a noble family. They managed to escape France during the French Revolution, and he eventually made his way to the Americas. When he came to America, somehow he landed in a Quaker meeting and heard preaching by a woman preacher by the name of Deborah Harvey. And through her preaching, through the reading of the Bible, and through reading William Penn's No Cross, No Crown, he came to faith in Jesus Christ. During his lifetime, Grier traveled more than 100,000 miles preaching the gospel. This is before jet planes, before cars. This is all horseback and on foot. He preached to common people. He preached to heads of state in Europe and the United States. He took a trip through Russia where he met with the Tsar and spoke the word of God to him. He also had occasion to visit with the Pope. Imagine that. And viewed the infamous Inquisition in Rome. Fearlessly, he preached the gospel to Catholic priests, to nuns, to bishops, wherever he went. It was Stephen Grier also that influenced famous Elizabeth Gurney Fry to become involved in the prison ministry that later made her famous. Wherever he went, he worked for the improvement of the life of prisoners, preached the gospel, brought new purpose to meetings with friends, and had great awakening among them. So Quakers in both England and the United States were also later influenced by the evangelical movement of John and Charles Wesley, the Bible societies. Joseph John Gurney was one involved in those in England. And so there was the beginning of an awakening. These revivals begin to bring new life into the denomination, including renewal of the missionary fire. However, the new fire that was a little spark that grew slowly as time went by. In 1821, there was a proposal brought to the meeting of sufferings of London Yearly Meeting to promote work among Negroes in Gambia. The proposal was declined by the yearly meeting, so it was taken up privately. So they're not quite ready yet to get back into missions outreach. Because of that reluctance to provide organized support at the beginning of this period, individuals began to go out on journeys by themselves, self-supported, or financed by friends and perhaps individual meetings. Well-known itinerant missionaries between 1830 and 1860 included James Backhouse, G.W. Walker, Daniel Wheeler, John Joseph Gurney, E.O. Tregellis, James Jupp, J. Chandler Grover, and Caleb Kemp, and Eli and Sybil Jones. Daniel Wheeler worked in Russia for a number of years as a tent-making missionary. From there he traveled to the South Sea Islands, where he ministered for a time. Then he went to Australia, where he preached to the convicts for 10 years. And after that, he went to South Africa, where he ministered among the Hottentots. Eli and Sybil Jones of New England Yearly Meeting in the United States ministered first of all in Liberia and later in Sierra Leone. From there they went to what's now the West Bank in Israel, a place called Ramallah, and started the Ramallah Friends School, which is still going very strongly. In fact, I'll talk about that a little bit more later. American Friends, like their British counterparts, soon gained a renewed vision for missions. And before the end of the 19th century, New England Yearly Meeting sustained a work in Syria. Indiana Yearly Meeting had sent missionaries to Mexico, Ohio Yearly Meeting had opened works in India and China. Iowa Yearly Meeting was working in Jamaica. Philadelphia Yearly Meeting had workers in Japan. And California Yearly Meeting had commenced its mission outreach in Alaska with the Eskimos. Late in the 19th century, the 5 Years Meeting was established. Now it's called Friends United Meeting. And the work of most of these yearly meetings was brought together under a newly formed American Friends Board of Missions and continued to work that way for a while. In the early part of the 20th century, new fields were opened in Cuba, 1900, Central America, 1902, South America in the 1919, 1920, and then California Yearly Meeting initiated the work in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. Oregon Yearly Meeting took up the work that had started with the Guatemalan Friends in Bolivia and later moved over into Peru. Later in the 20th century, both California Yearly Meeting and a young organization known as the Evangelical Friends Mission began to do work in Mexico, EFM in Mexico City, California Yearly Meeting in northern Mexico and Mexicali. Today, some of the yearly meetings are keeping that mission vision alive. In others, it's beginning to grow dim. And so I think it's up to us as leaders to fan that flame again and to help it to grow. It shouldn't come as any surprise that the yearly meetings, which are the most evangelical and evangelistic, are also the most missions-minded. Those mission projects that continue under lukewarm yearly meetings are, for the most part, social work, and very little evangelism and church planting takes place with them. For the most part, only the descendants of the Gurneites have continued the evangelical Christian faith and still have a missionary zeal to spread the gospel in other parts of the world. Others are ambivalent about Christianity, the authority of the Scriptures, salvation through Jesus. Paul Anderson, who's a professor of Quaker and Biblical Studies at George Fox University, has said this: tradition is the living faith of those now dead, meaning that the faith lives on in others after earlier people are gone. Traditionalism is the dead faith of those now living, meaning that the faith died with the people who had it, only their behaviors are carried on by others. Let me repeat that. Tradition is the living faith of those now dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of those now living. We need to be into traditional and not traditionalism, don't we? Continue to keep the light shining. Many Quakers don't believe that you have to be a Christian at all to be a Quaker. I was stunned when I picked up a faith and practice of one of our yearly meetings, and the question was asked, are Quakers Christian? And the answer was, originally we were, but we don't expect that necessarily of our members now. We can be a Buddhist, we can be a Mohammedan, we can be Hindu, whatever you want, and still be a Quaker. And Pink Dandelion, in an article that he wrote recently in Quaker Religious Thought, says that probably only about 50% of Quakers in England are what you would call Christian. We had a visitor to Guatemala years ago when I was there from Washington who came to our yearly meeting stations. He was a Quaker from Washington, and he began to ask, what's all this Holy Spirit stuff? And so in conversation with him, I found out that he was a Quaker Zen Buddhist. And he felt like George Fox would be perfectly fine with that, because the thing that ties us together is peace. Pink Dandelion has suggested that the characteristics of liberal friends are these: experience, not scripture, should be primary. Faith should be relevant to the age. Friends need to be open to new ideas. And in each age, friends should know more about the nature and will of God, a doctrine that he calls progressivism, and that as such, revelation has a chronological authority. But friends are growing, especially in the Global South. The Global South now constitutes the majority of Christians worldwide and also the majority of Quakers in the world. In 1940, North American Friends represented about 75% of the world of Quakerism. In 2000, the figure was only 27%. Only 27% of Quakers are found now in North America. Friends World Committee for Consultation puts out a helpful chart. Their latest one is published in 2012. At least that's the latest one that I have access to. They show that only 20% of Quakers reside in North America now in 2012, as of 2012. 15% in the Caribbean and Latin America. More than 50% of Quakers are found in Africa. Most of them in Kenya, with its 18 or 19 different yearly meetings. So let me go through a few areas of the world where Quakers are represented and give you a few statistics on them. Start with the Middle East.
Would this be a good time, Gene, to take a break? We do take a break around, well, it'd be 6 o'clock your time, but you tell us when would be a good break time.
This is a great break time.
I was thinking so, since we just completed the historical sketch there. But maybe before we take the break, we could ask for some questions or any comments. I have a comment to make, Gene. I would like for you to give a commentary on pink dandelion's beliefs, and I'd like for you to give it from your Christocentric point of view and your understanding of Friends' history. So give a critique of pink dandelion. And I know he's kind of pinkish, but give us a word on that from your perspective.
You know, I haven't read anything written by Pink Dandelion except this article in the Quaker Religious Thought. The article that he wrote in Quaker Religious Thought was written about future friends. And so, for the most part, he's citing statistics on Quakers in England and showing that at least 50% of, well, he calls all Quakers pretty much in England liberals. There are very few Christ-centered Quakers in England now. And there's probably one set of statistics that he quotes, probably about 20% of Quakers are non-theistic. They don't even believe necessarily that there's a God that you need to pray to. About 50% still believe that there is a God that we can pray to, so they are theistic, and about 50% would say that they're Christian. That's how they would name themselves, but for the most part, liberal. And again, as he said, characteristics of liberal Quakers, experience is more important than Scripture to them. And so he doesn't actually share his position in that article. I think if you want to know his position, Kevin Mortimer would be the one to talk to, because Pink Dandelion, as I understand it, was his mentor and his guide in his doctoral studies.
Okay, thank you for that. But I think my commentary on that is that those friends who claim not to be Christocentric have come so far from the historical beliefs of Friends that I hesitate calling them friends, because I could tell you that I'm a Roman Catholic, but that doesn't make me one.
Yeah.
And so that's my critique on Ben Pink Dandelion, and I've read a lot more than one article by him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Let me make one more comment about his article. He says in England and among British friends, the thing that ties them together and makes them friends is behavior, not doctrine. And so they consider themselves real friends because they continue to follow original Friends practices. That is, coming together and worship without a pastor, preacher, consensus, and so on, some of those kinds of things. Strong emphasis on the peace testimony. And so that's why they would call themselves Quakers, because of their behavior, but not because of their doctrine.
Thank you. I wonder if there are any comments or questions about anything that Gene has shared with us so far from other places. I know I had a text from you, Richard McKay. Does anyone, Richard or anyone else, want to make a comment?
I was just telling Dave that what Gene covered in this first half was pretty much what Donna and I was viewing last night on a video called God in America, and it's going through the history of how God was brought to America and preached to the Native American, and how the church was established as part of the basically government leadership in the new colonies. So the church and the state were a combined kind of thing, and we found some of the names that Gene was mentioning were also mentioned in this video. And it's a 3-part series, and each part is 2 hours long, and we have all 3 of them that we're watching.
What was the title again?
God in America.
God in America. So it specifically mentioned the Quakers?
It hadn't directly yet, but it did mention some. It did start leaning toward them, yeah.
Any other comments to be made by anyone?
Dave?
Yes, Jerry?
Is there anything in print by Gene that would be what he has presented so far in the historical area of the Friends Church from beginning to more modern time? Boy, it was powerful, and it's a great survey of our past and our heritage, and I just wondered if he had that in print in any form.
What's the word, Gene?
Yeah, I can, if anyone wants a copy, that's the first chapter of my dissertation. The first part that I presented, the historical part. I can send that to you in a PDF document. It's also, it should be in the library there, Dave, in my dissertation. I think there's a copy in the Barclay Library.
Well, yes, but of course, we would have to scan all that step by step. If you have it in the PDF form, maybe you could send it directly to Jerry.
Right. I'd be happy to do that. Send me your email address or send it to me through Dave or somehow. I'll
Okay.
Gene, why don't you very slowly give your email address, because another person or so might want that also. So
all
please,
right.
Okay, do it slowly.
Well, let me do the Barclay one. That'll be the easiest to.
Oh yeah.
So it's Gene.Pickard, Pickard, at barclaycollege.edu. Gene.Pickard at barclaycollege.edu.
That's Gene, Gene.Pickard.
Right.
At Barclay College, and Barclay College is all one. .edu. That was really a very helpful historical sketch. We've seen how Friends, from their very earliest day, have had a zeal for the spread of the gospel. Even during the 18th century, there were people in there doing that. So, anyone else? Any other comments to be made? Then why don't we take a 10-minute break? And in the meantime, may I say again, thanks to Mary and Marjorie for your good music that you provided us, which gave us inspiration as we were starting our meeting today. So, Gene, we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes, and thank you.
Good.
They don't want to listen to it, they can mute it. Go ahead, you only have 10 minutes. do you, what are some of the songs you got there? Well, that's all right. We don't need to do Rudy.
Rudy.
Yeah.
Is this, which one?
Well, I left my mic open. So. No, it's open.
Yeah. There might be something. Okay, I think I'm in.
Okay, I think we probably ought to come back together again. So I hope you all had as good refreshments as we did. Carol brought some pumpkin pie here. Gene, wish I could share it with you.
I wish you could too.
Yeah. Yes, Gene, that historical sketch there for the first part of this was really helpful. It shows us that the Quakers have been zealous for missions from the time of George Fox when he turned 22. And so if he was born in 1624, that would have been 1646. We Quakers have been involved in missions. Yeah. So, Gene, just feel free. About 5 minutes until 7 your time, we will break and I'll have a closing prayer and a word about our next session. Okay?
Okay. I would like to make a slight correction to Dave's introduction to me. I'm not teaching in the Quaker Studies track. I'm teaching in the missional track. The other friend that Dave mentioned has a Doctor of Missiology degree, is Ron Stansel. I believe he's the one you have in mind. And he will teach this same course in the Quaker Studies.
Okay, Gene, this is anticipatory of, this is called prophecy. because I am committed for you to teach in the Quaker studies.
Yeah.
So I know you're teaching. You had the first course in our missional multiplication, but the Quaker studies are not over yet.
So anyway, Ron Stansel is scheduled to teach the history of Friends in Mission in the Quaker Studies, and I would like to say I was just with Ron last week at Evangelical Friends Mission Board meeting. He's doing quite well. He still has some physical problems that are a result of his extended illness. If you're not all aware of it, he was found unconscious last spring at the Evangelical Friends Mission Board meeting in Quaker Ridge Camp, and spent some 11 weeks in the hospital in Colorado Springs before he was able to go home. He's actually flatlined once at least, and so the Lord brought him back and has given him some more time with us, and thank the Lord for that.
So, Gene, how is he doing in his mental and intellectual and memory capacities?
I think he's doing quite well.
Good.
His participation in the board meeting seems like the old Ron.
Oh, good.
The thing that he mentioned more than anything else was he has he's walking with a cane. He has some pain in his lumbar and legs area, and it's hard for him to travel and sit for a long time. But he said that there was some brain damage, but I couldn't detect it. So anyway, we thank the Lord for his recovery.
So since you're giving clarification, I think we all ought to know how that had the first Whittier College was there where you grew up. Now, what's that about?
Well, Whittier College was established in Salem, Iowa. And that was actually before Penn College was founded in Oskaloosa. But the college burned down, and they didn't have the funds to rebuild it. My mother tells me that she went to high school on that same site, so they must have built some buildings after that. But because of the lack of finances, it finally closed, and then Penn College became the Friends College of Iowa yearly meeting after that. But that would have been, Salem was founded in 1832. You see, that was many years before Whittier College in California was established.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. Having lived all those years in Whittier, I never knew where the real first Whittier College was.
Yeah, I actually have a pen that says Salem, Iowa, home of Whittier College.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks, Gene. Now, I'll mute my mic so we don't get feedback.
Okay. All right, the second part, I kind of like to go through by area and just tell you a little bit more about what Friends are doing, where they're doing it, and so on. I'm going to start with the Middle East. There isn't an extensive Friends presence in the Middle East, and so far as I know, there's no real serious evangelism and church planting going on there. But Ramallah Friends School, which was founded in 1869, as I mentioned earlier, by Eli and Sybil Jones, is still a thriving school. And it has about 1,200 students, a mix of Christian and Muslim, in the same school learning together. Quite well known, quite famous in that part of the country. We have had evangelicals teach there. I don't know what the number is. I did learn recently that Elizabeth Don Todd is working there in Ramallah School. Friends workers in the Middle East, for the most part, are working in media development, internet broadcasting, and education, the Arab world. In Asia, Friends constitute only about 4% of world Quakerism, so it's not a huge grouping of Quakers in Asia. But this includes, for the most part, evangelical Friends in Nepal, India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Taiwan. Those are the major players in the countries of Asia. Evangelical Friends Church Eastern Region, or as it was known at that time, Ohio Yearly Meeting, started to work in China in 1885. There's still a Friends work in Hong Kong. There's some lone missionaries, secluded as they say, to OMS. Dave Offrance is one of those working in Hong Kong. And Taiwan yearly meeting, of course, is a result of the work in China that carried on. Northwest yearly meeting carries on a type of tent-making missions ministry in mainland China, mostly by sending teachers, and for the most part teaching English in the universities in China. The Taiwanese Friends offer leadership training in different parts of Asia. Taiwan Friends have shown cooperation between their yearly meeting and mainland Chinese. They've helped in Nepal to train leaders. They've also helped in India and the Philippines to help train leaders in those areas. Eastern region also established a mission in India in 1892. Bundelkhand Indian Mission, and that later became kind of a springboard for Friends missionaries to minister all over India. By the way, let me mention Ron Stansel again. His book, Missions by the Spirit, is a book in which he describes the ministry of 4 Quakers in 4 different ministry areas. The one in India, he focuses on Everett Cattell. The one in Africa, he focuses on Arthur Chilson. The one in Guatemala on Ruth Esther Smith. And then the one in Bolivia on Jack Wilkins. I recommend that book very highly. It's a great book, not just for history, but also some good principles for missions. So he goes through the history there of the mission in India, and then also points out that the strategy of the American Friends working there gradually became an all-India approach, in which Friends supplied strategic leadership and evangelical fellowship in India. Some of them taught in Ealing Biblical Seminary, all India Christian education, Youth for Christ evangelism. Everett Cattell was especially prominent in some of those areas. Friends in Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia are organized in yearly meetings, those 3 at least. There are 2 less formally organized yearly meetings in Nepal. EFM sponsors 3 missionary units in Nepal, but there are 2 separate works going on with the missionaries there. Newer ministries are found in West Bengal, Kolkata, India, Dharwad in India, and Kerala State in India. We also have works sponsored by EFM in Bhutan, Bangladesh, and then in Cambodia by Evangelical Friends Church Southwest. The 4 major players in Asia are EFM, Taiwan, yearly meeting, Evangelical Friends Church Eastern Region, and Evangelical Friends Church Southwest are the 4 that sponsoring the major part of the work in Asia, especially in the eastern part of Asia. Almost all Asian Friends are affiliated with Evangelical Friends in Asia. As I said earlier, only 4% of Quakers worldwide are in Asia, but a total probably somewhere around 20,000 people in Asia call themselves Evangelical Friends. So the expansion is taking place now more spontaneously and often outside the direction of American Friends, which is a very delightful thing to be able to report. Taiwan yearly meeting is taking the initiative in these training programs by themselves. They're not taking it at the initiative of any American Friends. It's also a delight to see how networking is taking place. There's a small Friends movement in Burma, and that came about by a Burmese student who went to the Philippines to study. While he was in the Philippines, he became acquainted with Friends in the Philippines and decided to return to Burma to plant Friends churches there. So since 2004, there's been a presence of Friends in Burma with several small groups, no churches at this time that I know of. The mission in Bhutan was started by the Nepalese Friends. A Bhutanese man left the country as a refugee to Nepal. He became a Christian there, and then he began to witness to his brother in Bhutan, whose wife was very ill and couldn't find relief from her illness. And some of the Christians there told him to pray to the Christian God and his wife would be healed, and she was. He became a Christian, and now he's our leader there. Rupak Taman is his wife. There's a great movement going, a flourishing movement, friends, going in Bhutan. So new works are being opened by Friends Mission that are starting in consultation now, often in consultation with the yearly meetings that are already established. There are Asian immigrant churches in the United States, not a large number, but there are some that are related with Friends. And I mentioned earlier that more than 50% of Quakers worldwide are found in Africa, most of them in Kenya, where there are 18 or 19 yearly meetings. So there have been a lot of divisions there into different yearly meetings. Arthur Chilson and Edgar Hall and Willis Hotchkiss were the three young men that went to Kenya in 1902 to found the mission there. And Arthur Chilson worked there in that mission until 1928 when he returned to the United States. Those of you from Mid-America Yearly Meeting, I'm sure you're familiar with Chilson and his story to a certain extent. He became superintendent of Kansas Yearly Meeting at that time for 4 years. And then Kansas Yearly Meeting commissioned him to go to Burundi to start a new mission, which he did in 1934. He established medical and dental care, education work, nutrition, training programs among the disadvantaged, particularly the Hutus at that time. I remember when I was a student at Friends Bible College, we often heard of Radio Kordak in Burundi. That was one of their ministries. Also the hospital in Burundi, which continues to function under the supervision of Friends. You'll be familiar with Friends' names like the Choates, the Browns, the Thomases, Morrises, Youngs, Millers, Fergusons, Thornburgs. I've probably left some out, but those are the names that I'm familiar with from the history of Mid-America or Kansas Yearly Meeting in Burundi. Burundi divided, you may know this, you may not, Burundi divided in 2012 into 2 yearly meetings. So there's a yearly meeting at Kabimba, and now there's a yearly meeting at Kobilko. And they do share some leadership. Some of their representatives, government representatives, share this with the 2 yearly meetings. There are also now 2 Bible schools in Burundi. Both of them, interestingly, are named after Willard Ferguson. So they're the Willard Ferguson schools of ministry, and they're about a high school level. Friends World Committee for Consultation indicates that there are some 35,000 friends in Burundi. And then the Burundi missionaries were expelled from Burundi back in the 1980s. And so a team of those went to Rwanda to start a new mission there in 1986. They began to celebrate services in Rwanda in 1987. I think that's a wonderful testimony of missionaries who were undaunted by being expelled from one country, and rather than saying, okay, we'll hang it up now, we've done our job, they just transitioned into Rwanda, where there's a flourishing church there as well. At the present time, there's only one missionary unit in Rwanda. That's the Carpenter family, Brad and Chelsea Carpenter. Until last year, Dave and Debbie Thomas were also missionary unit there. And some of you, of course, know Molly Black, who spent a few months there until illness caused her to come back to the United States. So
Gene, Brad Carpenter's father is online with us tonight. You want to say hi, Bruce?
Hi, Bruce. I had lunch with Bruce a month or so ago, and he told me that he probably would be in on this meeting.
Good.
So.
Hey, Bruce, we're proud of you and what your family's doing.
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to hear Gene tonight. Gene, thank you a lot for talking about all of this, and I'm really anxious to get a copy of your beginning, the teaching that you gave tonight, the dissertation stuff. Now, you asked about Brad and Chelsea. Is that what you meant, Dave?
Go ahead and tell us.
Well,
right now.
A lot of people do know Brad and Chelsea and the kids. They have the 2 kids. Sarai is almost 4, and Gideon just turned 1 year old. They are doing some of the sabbatical kind of rest as well as trying to take care of a few things that they need to get taken care of. They have done quite a bit of the travel, the travel, fundraising, visiting churches. A lot. They've probably been to quite a few churches where our guests tonight, our participants tonight, attend worship. So I would guess quite a few people know them. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Bruce.
I have the privilege of being Brad and Chelsea's coach. EFM is assigned coaches to each of their field, and so I was asked to be the coach for the Rwanda field. It's a pleasure and a joy to be able to talk to Brad every couple of weeks about what's happening in Burundi. Brad's main ministry is called D4D, which is Discipling for Development, but it's often called Whole Life Discipleship as well, which it's a discipleship program that actually brings people into a close relationship with the Lord and often helps them to get their life in order so that they can begin to live a better lifestyle, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every way. It's a great program. Rwanda has also started a college that's probably about equivalent to our junior college, Rwanda Friends Theological College. They've been helped to do that by the Friends College in Kenya, so there's some networking going on there as well. The Friends World Committee for Consultation estimates that there are about 4,200 friends in Rwanda. And another interesting bit of information that at least I find interesting is that, there were civil wars both in Burundi and in Rwanda. There were massacres, there were genocides in both those countries. During those genocides, there were refugees that fled to other countries, to Congo and Tanzania, and Friends took the opportunity, those refugees who were Friends, took the opportunity to establish Friends Works there, in Congo and in Tanzania. So in Congo, there are at least 4 quarterly meetings that are formed. Friends World Committee for Consultation puts the number at about 3,000 in Congo who are now associated with Friends Church. In Central Africa and Tanzania, there are 3 or 4 congregations. I have 2 different sets of statistics. Elizabeth Dawn Todd wrote an article that in that Quaker religious thought that I mentioned, and she states that there are about 300, but Friends World Committee for Consultation suggests that there could be as many as 3,100 Friends in Tanzania. Evangelical Friends Church International was established in 1989, and it's made up of regional fellowships. North America is one of those, established in 89, Africa in 1993, Asia region, 1993, Latin American region, 1994, and Europe in 2007. That meets occasionally. We meet, the North American region meets once a year in our Evangelical Friends Mission meetings, and the superintendents meet at that same time. Friends in Latin America, several year meetings have been involved with them. The first one that I'm aware of was to Mexico in 1871. A family by the name of Purdy sent out by Indiana yearly meeting. And then the predecessor of EFM, the Commission on Missions formed by the Evangelical Friends Alliance, as it was called at that time, was formed in 1963. First missionaries were sent to Mexico City, Roscoe and Tina Knight. I had the privilege of knowing them in Friends Bible College while they spent 1 year there before they went to Mexico City. So California also established mission work in Mexico, in northern Mexico, in the Mexicali region. We no longer have missionaries there, but we continue to have a relationship with Mexico Yearly Meeting. With Mexicali area. Well, with Mexico Yearly Meeting, too, for that matter. I worked in San Antonio, Texas, out of college with a man by the name of Raymond Martin. And Raymond Martin established a work in Coahuila, the state of Coahuila in Mexico. So there are several churches in that area. In fact, most of your youth that go to Mexico go to that area in the spring, I think every other year now, if I'm not mistaken, to the Coahuila area. Daniel Vasquez, pastor there in Wichita, is from the state of Sinaloa and has encouraged Evangelical Friends Mission to get involved in a place called Siete Higos. There are 2 families that are preparing to go there as missionaries. One of those families is from Haviland, Kansas, and Haviland has taken a great interest in that work in Siete Higos, Sinaloa state of Mexico. Friends work in Cuba was established in 1900. Guatemala in 1902, when 2 young men, Thomas Kelly and Clark Buckley, single men, went to Guatemala. It's interesting to me, and I didn't think of it until tonight when I was looking over my notes, that was the same year that Chilson and his friends went to Kenya in 1902. So there were 2 missions established that same year by Friends. Ruth Esther Smith, as I mentioned in Ron Stanzel's book, is one of the focus. An amazing, amazing lady. Didn't go to Guatemala until she was 36 years old, and then spent 40 years ministering in Guatemala. Died there and is buried in the cemetery in Chiquimula, where I lived and ministered. Currently in Central America, there are 4 established yearly meetings: Guatemala yearly meeting, Honduras yearly meeting, El Salvador yearly meeting, and then the Friends Holiness yearly meeting. There are 2 headquarters, 2 yearly meeting headquarters in Chiquimula, Guatemala, where I live. The Guatemala yearly meeting and the Friends Holiness yearly meeting. Some of you will know the name Edgar Madrid. He's well known, especially in Friends World Committee for Consultation circles. Although he's very conservative, very evangelical friend, he likes to visit with them. And there are also two Friends seminaries in Chiquimula, Guatemala. One that was established in 1921, and the one that was established more recently by Edgar Madrid in Chiquimula. The mission in Bolivia has a really interesting beginning. There were 2 works that started there about the same year, in 1919. One was started by Central Yearly Meeting, has its headquarters in Indiana, and the other was started by a man by the name of William Abel, or William Abel. I'm not totally sure how his last name would be pronounced. He's a Native American from the United States who went to Bolivia to minister and preach the gospel. A young man by the name of Juan Ayllón was converted under his ministry, and he learned that a new Bible school was opening in Guatemala, and so he got on a boat to work his way to Guatemala. Unfortunately, he thought they were going to let him off in Central America. They took him to New York City. Somehow he managed to go overland from New York City to Guatemala and get there a month or so late to start his studies at the New Bible Institute in Chiquimula, Guatemala. After he graduated, he went back to Bolivia and started the work there that's become a flourishing work in Bolivia. The group that's called INELA in Bolivia was founded by him. Later he left that group and started another yearly meeting. Most of the work in Bolivia is among the Aymara Indian population. There are also some among the Quechuas. Most of them are rural, but there are many who are moving to new urban areas, some of them even to other countries in urban areas. There are Aymaras that have moved to Paraguay, Argentina, Brazil, and some even to Europe, where they're establishing Friends communities in those areas as well. The newest missionary venture in South America is by Evangelical Friends Mission, and that's a family by the name of Badgeleys who left last November to go to Ecuador. There was some hope that Peru Yearly Meeting would join with the Badgeleys and work in that ministry, and that still could happen. Currently, the Badgeleys are back in the United States. Sarah Badgeley, the wife and mother, has some physical problems that need to be dealt with, and so they're planning to spend a few months in the United States with the hope that they can go back to Ecuador next year sometime. I think one of the most fascinating things to me is to see missions coming from the younger churches, from the younger movements. Taiwan, for instance, I already mentioned how they're sending short-term missions trips to Nepal, to India, to the Philippines, to do leadership training in those areas. From Nepal, a mission was established in Bhutan by the Nepalese. The Philippines have helped to establish a mission in Burma, as I described earlier, by a student who went to the Philippines to study. Central America, we were in Central America for 100 years. And then finally, the last missionaries left. We were the last missionary unit to be there. We and the Canfields went from Central America. Long-term missionaries in Guatemala went from Central America to Cambodia to establish that mission in the 1980s, 1990s. But Central America itself is sending out missionaries to Cambodia. And I think that's just amazing, wonderful thing. The three major yearly meetings in Central America, Guatemala yearly meeting, Honduras yearly meeting, and El Salvador yearly meeting, are sponsoring 2 families of missionaries in Cambodia at this time. And then I already mentioned the fact that refugees from Burundi and Rwanda went to Congo and Tanzania to start works there. Rwanda yearly meeting is currently exploring the possibility of missions in South Sudan or perhaps Ethiopia. Burundi is considering sending missionaries to Tanzania to further that work there as well. And this happened a few years ago. I don't have the year down exactly, but some of you may have heard of this or remember it. The Eskimos from Alaska yearly meeting crossed the ice on their snow machines into Siberia to minister there to a people group that had basically the same language as they have. I don't think they're doing that currently, but they did it at least one time, maybe more than once. EFM was founded, as I said, in 1963. It's sponsored by 6 regions: Eastern Region, Mid-America, yearly meeting, Rocky Mountain yearly meeting, Northwest yearly meeting, Evangelical Friends Church Southwest, and Alaska yearly meeting. And the fields that EFM sponsors are Aguascalientes, Mexico, Ireland, Rwanda in Africa, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Philippines, Muslim ministry in England, Germany, the Middle East, and soon to the Philippines. The Quadels are planning to move to the Philippines as soon as their support is raised. Ecuador and Sinaloa, Mexico. And then, this is a little bit strange for people who are not associated with Friends. We have our yearly meetings, but then we also have Evangelical Friends Mission. And individual yearly meetings also sponsor missions in different parts of the world. We have individual yearly meetings sponsoring missions in Cambodia, Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Brazil, Indonesia, Russia and Ukraine, China, Taiwan, Hungary, Morocco, Jamaica, India, Thailand, Romania, and Ramallah. And I think I've got them all, but there may be some more. So those are the areas where Friends are ministering now. The mission zeal was recovered, and we trust that the Lord will help us to continue that. I would like to share some of the things that Ron Stansel says in his book on Missions by the Spirit. He talks about the values that we have as friends. We're influenced by traditions and beliefs about the Holy Spirit, interpersonal relationships of peace and harmony, convictions that the human condition involves both physical and spiritual needs, the belief that a passionately holy life full of integrity was required of them as missionaries. We believe that women are equal to men. There's a human potential in all cultures touched by the Spirit. And we believe in and we promote social justice and compassion as well as evangelism. Now, Stansel also points out that Friends missionaries weren't perfect, of course, and we all know that, and none of us are perfect either. They sometimes confused Western civilization with conversion. They sometimes failed to be fully sensitive to the work of the Spirit, even through indigenous cultures. They at times harshly argued with their colleagues. Someone has made a little ditty, to live above with saints we love, oh, that will be glory. But to live below with those we know, well, that's another story. Well, believe it or not, that happens on the mission field. Missionaries sometimes just don't get along. And if you read the history of Arthur Chilson and his colleagues. He and one of his colleagues didn't get along well, so that happens. And Stansel goes on to say that sometimes Friends missionaries wasted their time on fruitless enterprises. But at the same time, he mentions several positive characteristics of Friends missionaries that I would also like to cite. They recognized and lamented some of the evil encroachments from outside cultures and looked for ways to affirm some of the old, disappearing non-Western ways. They loved God. They persisted. They carried a vision of spiritual transformation. They did not attempt to build personal empires. They were rugged individuals, but not Lone Ranger individuals who drove people away from Christ. They were ethical people who knew their public and private lives mattered and that their silent testimonies counted more than the elegance of their words. They were pastoral people who loved others deeply. They were leaders who were unafraid to lean forward into pain and conflict on behalf of their flock. So those missionaries prioritized spiritual needs over physical needs, but they didn't neglect the social and physical needs of the people that they were ministering to at all. They had an abiding concern for the elevation of the status of women, and in all these things they differed from the colonial administrators where they were working. So those are the positive aspects of the Friends missionaries. So, that's the end of my presentation, but I trust that it's not the end of missions outreach for Friends. Whether you're with Evangelical Friends Church or with Evangelical Friends Mission or individual yearly meetings or the supporting missions, I encourage you and I ask the question, where do we go from here?
Thank you, Gene. Now I'd like to ask, we have about 3 minutes for comments or questions from any of our friends. Anyone like to give a comment on this? Anyone have a question for Gene? You've been around the world tonight. What are you thinking about all this, Dennis McDowell and Fowler?
Just a lot to process from Gene, and so just kind of storing it all and just a lot of information there. Appreciate it.
Well, it's an amazing amount of information, isn't it?
Yeah.
You had Gene as a teacher in your master's.
Yes.
That's
and
right.
It was good and a lot of wisdom there that we've been able to get from Gene.
Yeah, good. Richard McKay, you've also had Gene in a class, haven't you? I don't know.
Richard's gone.
Oh, did he leave?
It's not his name's not on here anymore.
Oh, okay. Thanks for telling me. I won't keep waiting. Anybody down there in South Texas want to have it? Do you have any responses or over at Faith, Friends, or Rocky Mountain Unit Meeting? Anybody have any comments you want to make before we close tonight?
This is Joe Watkins down in Angleton. Being a history major and a government minor, I did listen to all of the countries named, but especially in those countries south of the U.S., but I didn't hear any mention of the one and only English-speaking country in Central America.
Am I back on?
What about that, Gene?
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. There is a working belief. I can actually send you 2 or 3 documents. I have a document that was, I think, collated by Lois Davis, one of my colleagues in Central America, and it goes through a whole list, starting with Africa, and goes through and it mentions beliefs and the work that's there. Short paragraph on each of those countries. So I can send you that as well. There's a school, if I'm remembering correctly, in Belize. And then I could send you I can send you all my notes that I used tonight. The one that I mentioned earlier, the first chapter of my dissertation, is a little bit more complete on the first part of what I presented. I gave you a summary of that, so I can send you that and this presentation and the collation of where friends are working in different countries of the world.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Anyone else? We've just about used our time. Yes, Jerry.
Yes, Jerry. It was good to get to see Gene again. He was at Friends Bible College when Mary and I were there as instructors. And it's good to see you again, Gene. And I tell you, the research that you must have done to put together this presentation and to put together, I'm sure, useful things that you use in your teaching. It was very good, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and you will be hearing from me by email, and I would like to have your notes on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your kind words. I'll be happy to send them to you.
Gene, you do have an amazing knowledge of Friends missions, both historically and globally, and listening to you, just listening to you, sparked our enthusiasm to take our place in the Great Commission too. That's the mark of a good teacher. You don't have to preach at us. You can engender that desire and challenge in us by simply sharing as you have done tonight, and you've done it well. So we thank you for broadening our knowledge of Friends Global Missions, for increasing our appreciation for those who have in the past and are currently giving themselves in Friends Missions, for what you have done yourself in Friends Missions on the mission field, and for challenging us to renew our commitment to missions. We're indebted to you, Gene, and I thank you for this.
My pleasure, David.
Yeah. Our next Institute meeting will be December 5. That's the first Monday in December. Carrie Corliss will share with us about her ministry through Communitas and her church planting ministry in Wichita. She has some unconventional forms of ministry, but she's reaching people that no one else can reach. So I know you're going to find that helpful as well. So friends, if there's nothing more, let's close this session with prayer together. Eternal God, we thank you for speaking to us through Gene Pickard. We thank you for the ministry of Gene. We thank you for all of us in the Institute family and for the gift of providing us to do our ministries. We thank you for our global Friends witness, for the missions and ministries of Christ Church worldwide. Bless us now as we go from here with renewed commitment to your calling for us in the Great Commission to take the gospel to all people in every nation. And we give you the praise, the honor, the glory, the thanksgiving. In the name of Christ, who calls us to himself and to missions. Amen. Thank you all, and thank you again, Gene. And Gene, I'm so happy you are going to be moving to Berkeley College. I just think this is the best of all. So there's a whole lot more that my prophecy is going to talk in terms of Quaker studies. I teach a course called Teachings of Friends. I can assure you, you're going to be in Quaker studies around here. Hey, we love you. We love you, Gene. We love your daughter here, Heather, who's among us. And we'll probably get to see your son Scott more often now that you're living here. And we're looking forward to Myra coming too. So a lot of great things are ahead. And thank you. Yeah, thank you. What a great evening this has been. You have an amazing knowledge of Quaker missions around the world.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, friends.
Good night.